Welcome to Tabletop Tommies. I'm Jonny,
And I'm Phil.
and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about World Open War, our experience at the tournament, what it was like for the second year in a row, how we did, the armies we saw, what it was like for our first competitive tournament of V3, basically. I think we should just jump in, Phil. And my big question is, what did you decide to take for your first international competitive tournament of V3?
So I settled on US literally about 5 days before the list deadline. So I'd been practicing with Japanese, trying to make the Japanese work. I'd put my hand up in our team with the British Lions with Graham and Gerwin to say I'd take Axis. So playing with Japanese, it wasn't working for me. Graham swapped to Germany about a week, 10 days beforehand, which freed me up. I just painted a US Marine army, so I went with US. So I played one game with it before. Wow.
Nice and prepped then.
Nice and
Yeah.
prep. I've been playing US like to get to learn how to play V3. So I've been playing kind of the US, since we got our hands on the rulebook, but not in a competitive build at all.
No, and to
Um,
be fair, they are the beginner's army, aren't they?
They are, yeah, and I very much lent into that because my list was unbelievably vanilla. So I played one game before the list deadline against Charlie from the South Coast Pirates. I then changed it, put the list in, and played one game after the deadline against Michael, also from the South Coast Pirates. So I had a sum total of one and a bit games with the list going into
Nice.
WoW. In terms of the list itself, it was 14 dice, so it was really low. I was involved in list checking, and once my list had been accepted and approved, I then got access to the other ones to check. And I was going through all these lists going, "Oof, 18, 19, 20, 21 dice. And I'm like, okay, 14, a little bit low. Um,
Yeah, especially now that you've got to have sort of three or four officers, that immediately
yeah,
pushes you up past the 12 dice.
yeah. And I basically wrote a V2 list. So I had, it was four platoons. So you had to take one rifle platoon for every non-rifle platoon. So I had two rifle platoons. One rifle platoon was two eight-man regular Marines stubborn with one BAR. And the other one was kind of half SMG, half rifles with some scout cars. I had a double mortar and a heavy weapons platoon with spotters, and then my armor platoon was two DACA Stuarts. So I took the M3 Stuarts with Recce and the extra MG, and the M16 GMC. So
Nice.
14 dice, five armored vehicles, as vanilla as you can get. Like the only special rules that affected me were the Marines got an extra shot on top of the normal one per three that the US are getting. They had to be stubborn, and HMGs didn't lose the +1 over long range with the US. So yeah, it was
Yeah,
it was really simple. Yeah.
it was. Yeah, what I liked that Russell had done was he included the BARs
Mm.
in the rapid fire rule that they
Yeah, the
get
the,
now.
the +1. Yeah.
Yeah, which I
Plus,
think was a nice addition because it meant that it was worth taking BARs again.
yeah.
Because under the current rules, I'm just not sold on BARs at 6 points each.
Yeah. And I'd painted them up, so I wanted to use them. So
Yeah. I very nearly used my BARs from my US as artillerymen, just
yeah,
so because they're not going to see the table until that rule changes, I don't think now.
yeah. Yeah, and in terms of like where it sat within our team, so Graham went for Germany. He had quite a killy list, yeah, a couple of Kugel blitzes, minimal infantry, HE and autocannons and that sort of thing. And Gerwin was playing Soviets, and he had a list designed not to die. So
Nice.
Soviets in body armor and so on. So we did, but we did talk about it, and I said this on the episode with Bo. We did kind of build a killy list, a movement list, which was mine, and then a stand still and don't die list, which was Gerwin's. So we tried to kind of like make sure that we covered the general missions we might
Yeah.
come across.
Yeah, that was my big takeaway after the weekend that because we were playing three different missions each game as a team, we sort of stumbled into the strategy because we basically built the best three lists we thought we could build. And then we realized that actually every game was a movement and objectives and a kill points.
Yeah.
And we did happen to sort of have a theme that worked for it. I think we probably could have optimized more, and that would be my
Hmm.
takeaway for next year. If he's doing it in the same selection process where instead of choosing your opponent, you're choosing the mission and the table,
Mm.
then I think that is the way to go. Have one for kill points, one for movement, one for objectives.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So if my list was vanilla V3, your list was two fingers up to V3. You're still playing V2. You're still playing V2.
I don't think so. I think that's an unfair statement. I mean, it looks like that on the surface, but under the surface, there's some other stuff going on. I mean, like you, because of that team rule where we had to have one axis, we also had the same dynamic as a team where we knew someone was going to play Germans or Hungarians
Yeah.
because Nebels are still super powerful. And so if you have to take an axis, it was going to be one of those two.
Hmm.
I did have my eye on the Hungarians myself because Russell had very kindly given them free recce on all the vehicles. And he'd also given them the what was in the soft underbelly book, I think, the strength 3 or less gets to reroll the pen.
Yeah.
And so I had this list built with Nimrods. So 5 Nimrods, and then I think like 3 to 5 Nebels, something like that. And then the flotilla, the Danube flotilla squads, where
Yeah.
they could have 5 point LMGs with -1 shot because they're like 1908 MGs, I think. And so I fancied that. But then what I'd missed in like the months leading up to it was the fact that you had to have one rifle for every special platoon. And so that meant I was going to have to take at least 4 inexperienced squads, which are very easy to lose in kill points. They're not fast for movement and they're not good at holding objectives. And I really didn't fancy that. And so I also didn't know what I was going to take until very close before. And so I did end up leaning back on my sort of B2 style US. And I actually didn't get any games in beforehand. But it was very similar to what I've ran historically. And like you said, what I've ran in sort of like V3 playtests. So
Mm.
for my rifle platoons that I didn't really want to take anyway, I took Ranger squads,
Yeah.
3 SMGs so that you're not going to charge them, especially with the new close quarters rules. With inexperienced lieutenants, after we gave large about taking regular lieutenants now, I
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah,
find the points for them. So
yeah.
yeah, I was really worried I would lose them on like a prep or something because I knew I had to put them
Mm.
down. So I rather than paying 30 points for a regular, I paid 28 for the inexperienced with his bud.
Yeah, yeah.
I then took 4 engineer squads with flamethrowers, and that was partly because I think flamethrowers are still good, but partly just because I wanted to see if they
Hmm.
were still good, even with the new rules. The Dodgers, because of that long range benefit, plus now in V3, point blank, you get the extra penetration bonus.
Because you were
And then,
taking dodges with HMGs, weren't you?
yeah, I was,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
which is a tactic I'd been trying at the end of V2. And
Mm.
I've got to say, like, it did transfer nicely into
Hmm.
V3. And then I took in my artillery platoon, I took 3 Nebelwerfers, well, 3 American rocket launchers,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
effectively the same thing. So I ended up with 4 inexperienced lieutenants basically with a buddy, and this is what I was saying. I ended up with 19 dice in total. With
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
hadn't intended to build a high dice list, especially. I was aiming for sort of at least 16, but because I had to take so many lieutenants and then so many ranger squads,
Hmm.
there's really it just piles up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like us, in the previous episode where I was talking about we're not going to see inexperienced officers, and even said that in the tutorial video. I took 3 inexperienced officers,
Yeah.
one of which had a buddy, and the other two were on their own.
I
But
think if I didn't have to take 2 rifle platoons,
mm,
what I might have done is taken 3 ranger squads and then upped the veterancy of all my lieutenants because actually having the 3 man squads regular actually would have been really useful for us. But I couldn't squeeze like having to take a fourth officer
yeah.
meant I had to downgrade everyone else.
Yeah, and to be fair to my list, because I was running the scout cars, which had a transport capacity of 8,
Mm,
and the Marines are a minimum of 7, I didn't want 2-man officer squads because it was one officer plus 7 Marines, 3 SMG or 4 SMGs, 3 rifles in a scout car, times 2.
yeah.
So yeah, my double officer was the one that went with the heavy weapons platoon, and basically those two, that double officer just ran back and forth along the back line, buffing units before they took order tests. So.
Yeah, and the officers and transports are brilliant now, to be fair.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Really good, especially for these open topped armored ones.
Yep. They
Um,
can shout away, and you can do your snap to, so snap your vehicle, your officer, and squad inside, and yeah.
yeah. And then my teammates took so
Hmm.
Rich, who's a regular on the tournament scene, um, he wasn't sure what to take really. So he has played Germany quite a lot in V2. So I think he also was doing a bit of an experiment into V3 to see what worked and what didn't. And so he took a low dice count German list, which was good for kill points missions.
Yeah.
I think he was at 13 dice.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then,
I
and
think
then,
it's like the joint lowest.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is really nice because it means even if you're not that killy, you still haven't got that much to lose really in kill
Yeah.
points. And then Phil took, uh, it was sort of the best of Soviets list where he had he had sort of a smattering of everything.
Mm.
Again, in the same sort of vein, sort of like seeing what works, but also you've got a tool for every job, which I quite like, to be honest, as a list. It puts you in good stead, but it
Mhm.
means you don't have sort of a unique strength. And I think that was the one where if we'd done it sort of like in hindsight, I
Mhm.
think I would have made because I ended up playing objectives because of the Rangers. And
Yeah.
so I think Phil probably should have went for speed or vice versa. Phil lent more into the heavy veterans,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I could have lent more into the speed. Because the Rangers were really fast, to be fair, so they were really useful for those
Mhm.
movement missions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think talking to Graham and Gerwin afterwards, I think arguably Gerwin would change this a little bit and maybe go for a few more infantry to make it easier to hold objectives, and Graham would have a look at less squishy units to really lean into that hard killing power. So
nice. Should we move into the games themselves then?
yeah, yeah. So we were in a group with Spain, USA, and Wales too. Um, and yeah, a tough group.
Mm.
We played Spain first up, and the three of us said beforehand, if we beat Spain, big if,
Hmm.
if we beat Spain, we're on basically because we fancied our chances against the US and let's see if we can win the group. We didn't beat Spain. However, we did have a victory. So I played Yano. I beat Yano, and Graham and Gerwin lost to
Nice.
Akies and Carlos. Yeah, thank you. I've not played Yano before. I played Akies last year, so played Yano this year, which was effectively it was a version of land grab or what was sectors. However, you didn't score in the neutral zones, so you were getting kill points and also points for being in the opposing quarter. And it was a close game, but I just managed to edge it. I think Yano, to be fair to him, had got confused because he was expecting to score in the neutral zone.
Mm.
And had he scored in the neutral zone, I think he would have nicked it by, sufficient, a couple of points to win.
Yeah.
As it was, I think I'd done enough to win, but actually he had quite a few in what would have been the neutral zone. Um, so yeah, so kicked off against Yano in the first game. Second game we played USA, and I played John Ross, who's been on the channel before, and is a WTC captain. We played fight and withdrawal, which effectively the attackers trying to push the defenders back, but deny them getting them into their sort of deployment zone.
Hmm.
And meanwhile, the attacker's also trying to get out of their deployment zone. So I elected to be the attacker. John had quite a similar list to mine. He had two Panzer threes, two Panzer twos, and then like lots of like 5 or 6 man units with LMGs, German list, and an air observer, which was great because I had so much flack because I had
Yeah.
the GMC and also the two scout cars that I wasn't worried about the air observer. So I won that game. I
Did you
kind of
manage to chase the airstrike off with your flak?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nice.
So John called it in turn one to come in turn two, and I had 24 shots from the M16 and 12 shots from the two scout cars, six shots each. So it wasn't getting through.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I only had the 4 HMG on the Dodgers, and I already would have been quite happy to face some air observers.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So that was good games. I kind of dealt with John's small units.
Mhm.
To get the dice in my favor, and then I focused on the Panzer threes and Panzer twos. And we drew that as a round, so we weren't able to beat USA. So we went into the final game against Wales too, and I played Matt, who I've played before. Again in sectors, genuine sectors, land grab this time. Matt had a 20 dice list, so I was a little bit concerned because he was 6 dice ahead of me. He was playing US with double air observers, and the one major mistake I made all
Mhm.
all weekend was this one. I didn't deploy any flak, because obviously in land grab, you've got prep bombardment, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to lose either the M16 or the two scout cars. So I put my M16 and scout cars in reserve, and I put my Stuarts on the table. Um, he then managed to get both of the air observers off on turn one. They came in on turn two, and by the end of turn two, he'd pinned out an entire Marine squad. Um,
Nice.
but because on turn two, all of my reserves had started rolling on, the second hit from both the air observers didn't come in. So once I kind of nullified the air observers and nullified his two bazookas, I was then able just to sweep up. So I won.
Yeah.
No, I drew that game. I drew that game.
Yeah.
Um,
To be fair, if the price you pay to get rid of the air observers is one squad, then actually
yeah,
you're still at the points advantage, really. So it's not the end of
yeah.
the world, really.
No. So yeah, I mean, I think I won. No, sorry, I drew, but I
Hmm.
was one point away from winning. So in
Yeah.
some ways, it's 6-1, half dozen the other. So, and we won that round overall. So I was 2 wins and a draw from day one, and we finished third in our group. So Spain won, USA was second, us, and then Wales.
So you went into group three for day two,
Went
which
into
is a nice
group
place to
three
be.
for day
Yeah.
two. Yep.
Nice.
So before we
Um,
do day two, what about you and your team for day one?
yeah. So interestingly, so what's interesting there is you seem to have got a lot of the parents you would have picked anyway going up against the
Yeah,
air
yeah,
observers.
yeah.
And I had sort of, in the first game, I had the opposite experience where I chose the objectives mission for myself. So if we looked at the three tables, we said, well, Rich can do kill points. One was sectors where really it was going to be sort of kill points with a bit of movement. And then I was like, oh, I'll take the objectives, which was like a King of the Hill mission, basically. Because four of these objectives were on this big hill in the middle of the table. And then I ended up playing Ben of the South Coast Pirates,
Hmm.
the captain of the team as well. So it was a captain on captain game.
Yeah.
And but he had his Japanese, which is the one list I wouldn't have gone up against because they had all the rules that counter my flamethrowers and all the other
Yeah, yeah.
stuff. And so it was a really tough game, very sort of like dicey, where there was sort of a hill in the middle and there was a hill on the flank. So I put the rocket launchers up on the hill on the flank, looking down on the big hill with all the objectives on. And then, of course, because of that, he's then waiting for his moment to get up the hill.
Hmm.
Because what he did was basically allow me to get on the hill first, so then I couldn't shoot at his units because they were within 6 inches of my ranger squads, who
Sure.
also just wouldn't die. So I had like three ranger squads with one man left, and
Right.
I was like willing him to kill them every time he shot at them or something. It was like, come on, kill this last man, because then once you kill them, I'll be able to shoot you with the Nebels. Never really got it off, so it basically was just a big muddy mess in the middle, and we ended up with a draw because neither of us could really shift the other one from the hill. But a really good game, really sort of tight fought game, that one.
Hmm.
Um, as a round, we won that one. So Rich drew his, I won mine, and then Phil won his sort of sectors in the town game, which was a really nice result, really. I was expecting sort of like a draw across the board.
Mm.
Because they're a good team and they had good lists to counter our lists as well.
Yeah,
Game,
they are a good team, and they've been. Well, I said this in the episode with Bo. They've been working hard recently, and I'd been involved in playing against them and bouncing ideas around and so on. So yeah, I knew they were a team to look out for. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So then that put us on a win going into game two
Hmm.
against Northern Ireland, which was I didn't really know anything of this team really,
No.
which so you didn't really know what to expect. Again, I went for objectives and I got lucky with the dice roll because it was like a desert table
Hmm.
with like courtyards outside of all the doorways with like the high walls so your infantry can't be
Mm.
seen in the
Hmm.
courtyard. But all the courtyards and the doorways were basically facing one side of the table. So if you
Okay.
chose that side of the table, you could run into the courtyards, like fight a battle around the streets, just wasting everyone's time. And then last dice of the game, basically, I just dropped my units who'd done nothing for the game, like my officer squads who'd been hiding in courtyards, just dropped into buildings, and I captured like three objectives in one turn, just
Okay.
at the very last turn. Um, and this was one where he had the two Daka Stewarts,
Hmm.
very V2, and I just ignored them basically.
Okay.
One of them went chasing the rocket launchers, and obviously they don't have that many shots now, and you've got your cover saves, and I can recrew, and so he just went charging after these, and till by the end of the game, he was point blank up to the last one to finish
Mm.
it off. But while he'd been doing that, obviously I'd just been moving my infantry sort of away from him. And the other one sort of got caught on the other flank doing a similar thing to one of my ranger squads, just sort of like ramming this ranger squad. And then while that was happening, my engineers just swooped around the back of it. And this is where I was really impressed with the HMGs because on the back of a Stuart, very
Mm-hmm.
tasty target.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so we got a win out of that one.
Very
Um,
good.
so then we went into game three where the group was us, Scotland, and then the Pirates third.
Pirates and Ireland. Yeah.
And so basically, if Scotland and England drew and
Hmm.
the Pirates beat Ireland with a strong result, they'd leapfrog both of us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so it was really interesting, basically, what was going to happen. Um, I went in and also in game two, I'd played Ed, who was the captain of Ireland.
Hmm.
In game three, remember, we're just random drawing these because we're picking the mission we want, not the opponent. Game three, I played Phil, the Scotland captain.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
I
you've
had
played
three games against the three captains, yeah,
three captains. Yeah, yeah,
which is crazy. The Scots had really interesting lists as well because
yeah. Yes.
they really lent they went very much against the generalist list and
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
lent into one specific niche. And so like Ali had brought, I think, five tanks,
Yeah,
and then Johnny had brought like two observers and no vehicles.
yeah.
And Phil had also done a no vehicle list. And we played double envelopment, but with quarters.
Hmm.
And because the infiltrator rules now, you can just go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
He could just set them up right on my table edge.
And then run off if you
Walk off
needed to.
turn one, yeah. So he had
Yeah,
four
yeah, yeah.
units that were forward deploying. Like, I think it was two snipers and two observers or something.
That's right. Yeah,
Um, and so turn one, he set them up, and then over the course of turn one, he just walked off the table once he'd done the other stuff he wanted to do.
yeah.
Which actually I didn't mind because actually I was worried about being hit by his observer and his sniper
Mm,
sniping my Nebbles and just putting pins on and stuff. But equally, it did mean he started the game with 12 victory points,
hmm.
which was really interesting. But because it was quarters, the Rangers led the way basically. So now they're 36 inches up the table, which meant
Mm,
they got off sort of
hmm.
turn two, turn
Turn
three at the
two.
latest.
Yeah.
And so we basically, the game sort of started properly, sort of turn three, where we started a 700 points kill points game basically because we'd got
Yeah.
400 points off each.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then because I had sort of more killy stuff left. And I also we had a bit of a game of sixes where I had the rocket launchers, he had two heavy mortars. I sort of got the advantage there and then ended up winning that one. And then as a team, Rich got a draw against Alistair
Hmm.
and Johnny, Scottish Johnny,
Scottish
beat
Johnny.
English Phil. And
Yep.
so and so I think we basically drew against them. Um, but we had more points because of secondaries, I think. But what was really interesting is that result meant that our group at the end of day one, the Pirates jumped from third to second
Yeah.
and leapfrogged the Scots basically. And the Scots moved down to group three and we went into group one.
And you were only 1 point ahead of the Pirates.
Yeah,
So
because they had a really good round
against
three.
Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, and I mean in our group, Spain were the runaway winners, and we were 1 point behind USA. So even though we drew against the USA in our round two, because we did really well against Wales and we picked up some points against Spain, yeah, we pushed them as well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it was really interesting looking at like the points across the groups because obviously you've got like big points differences, but then it's hard to tell what that means because obviously you're not playing the same opponents.
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, so you look at the first group, which had Germany and Denmark in, for example. Germany did it get 30 points from
Yeah,
day one?
Germany got 30 points and Denmark
Yeah,
got
yeah, yeah.
15. And
Yeah.
so Denmark really were far away, but actually were
Mm,
second in their group, which was
yeah.
interesting. And but interestingly, in Group B, Spain only got 24 and USA got 15, the same as Denmark.
Yeah.
And so this is where it's like weird trying to compare people because like in Group C, which was Poland, Wales, the Mixed Nuts, and Netherlands,
Mm,
the winner of the group only got 18 points.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, they were kind of knocking each other around all day, weren't they?
Yeah.
Those four teams. Yeah, it really was interesting. Yeah, other than Germany getting full house in their group, no, and well, to be fair, and Spain as well. Spain did pull away, but the other two groups were very very close.
Yeah,
Certainly on
the,
day
the
one.
top two places were separated by Group C was 2 points, Group D was 1 point between the top two. So
Hmm.
it was good. And equally, Scotland got 15 in Group D.
Hmm.
If they'd been, that was the same as what Denmark got in their group.
To
If
finish
and
second.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so it's really interesting, but equally, it just shows you play the opponent on the day, don't you? You can't really play the points game. You have to
yeah.
play your group basically.
Yeah, yeah, and I think picking up on an earlier point, certainly with us, Graham did take the hit quite a few times in terms of the missions. We very much looked at the missions, and if there was an objectives mission, we pushed Gerwin towards it, and if it was a movement mission and or kill points, then I would take it. I think if we were playing, normal solo, V3
Mm,
competitive, high end tournament, I don't think any of us would have taken the list that we took as they were, because they did complement each other and they were designed to do different things depending on the missions and the pack, that we were aware of as we put those lists together. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, we didn't go too heavy into each way. So mine, I think I would run something quite similar, even sort of solo if I'm having to deal with all three types of missions on my own.
Hmm.
Um, because I wasn't sure, even though we had the missions in advance, and I had a suspicion he was going to do sort of like one of each for each
Mm.
thing. But there was always a chance that we end up playing 3 kill points or three movement. And I
Yeah,
didn't,
yeah,
and so I deliberately kept myself a little bit more generalized than actually probably would have been beneficial.
yeah.
So day two, then you're in group three.
So day two, we're in group three. We've got Spain two. We've got Mixed Nuts, which essentially is Denmark two, although Alex Bundock had jumped on to take a place of someone at the last minute. And we also
Scotland.
had Scotland. Thank you. So we started off with Spain two. I was playing Jacob. I played Jacob earlier on this year at the WoW qualifiers for England. This was essentially double envelopment. So points for kills and double envelopment, but you also got points for kills. Um, he had no vehicles. It was a British list, lots of infantry and double 25 pound Bofors and double artillery observer. So I kind of knew with this one, if I could ride out the artillery observers, and focus on knocking out his Bofors and all the 25 pounders, there wasn't really anything that was going to touch the vehicles. So I did win that one, but it was a great game. By the end of it, I was basically trying to push my units off the board, and Jacob was desperately trying to assault my open-topped scout cars and M16 to basically pop them. And he managed, I think one of the scout cars, he'd managed to get a superficial result, which meant they didn't have the double pivot, which
Mm,
was really annoying because I was on the road, and with the double pivot, I would have got off on a run order and so on. But yeah, managed to win that one. And as a team, we won that. We got 4 points in that one, so we were doing well after round one. Round two, we played Mixed Nuts, and I played Alex in Seek and Destroy. So just straightforward kill points mission. Alex had five 259s. He was playing Germany, so five 259s, two Nebelwerfers, and then some inexperienced squads with LMGs and some Fallschirmjägers. So interestingly, Alex and I basically both worked out that if I stayed 24 inches away from his 259s, he wasn't going to be able to penetrate the Stuarts,
mm,
because of the long range and so on. So he just kept firing HE at the Stuarts and also the M16, and providing, so effectively what I did was just put the M16 close to the Stuarts because my M16 was a command vehicle, and I had that spare officer to run around and buff and so on. So I was taking loads of pins, but I was able to keep passing my order checks because of the morale
yeah.
bonus.
And
I
now
got
with only -1 to hit,
Yeah,
regardless of pins, you just
yeah.
have to pass the test, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I got lucky. So Alex's double Nebelwerfers. I was hiding behind a massive building with two mortars, two squads, and an officer. And he rolled, missed everything but hit the building, and then blew the building up. So this building, which was a magnet for his Nebelwerfers, became a ruin. And I was like, well, fantastic. I can just sit behind this for the rest of the game because you can't bounce shells off it. So I kind of ignored his 259s, focused on knocking out the Nebelwerfers, and then the dice just fell away for Alex. So that was a tough game for Alex. So I won that one, and I think we drew as a team. I don't think we won. No, I can't remember. So we went into the final game against Scotland, and we knew with the points as they were, we needed one win from our 3 games, and then we'd win the group.
That's a nice position to be in, to be fair.
Yeah. So I played Phil, Scotland captain, on a similar. I think it was armored thrust. So you got points for kills and you got points for getting vehicles off the board. I expected to play out.
Interesting.
Yeah, I expected to play Ali because obviously Ali had 5 armored vehicles.
Yeah.
So we, between the 3 of us, Gerwin took the objectives mission. I took the movement mission with armor because I had 5 armored vehicles, and Graham took the kill point mission. He was playing surrounded. I fully expected to play Ali, but I ended up playing Phil, and Ali had gone on to surrounded. Because he fancied his chances with the Panzers just rocking up on any table edge and so on.
Yeah.
It was a tough game for Phil, to be fair. So, he had the 2 artillery observers, which obviously get the double roll for distance because they're Soviets. He had 3 dog mines, 2 AT rifles.
Well, this is what I wonder if he was banking on. You'd put armor down, which gives his dogs something to do.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting choice, that I would have expected Ali to be on that one as well.
Yeah, and it was first wave as well. So basically, Phil set off both his artillery observers on turn 1, but he also everything came on, so he had to bring on his dogs and his AT rifles. So I just thought, right, if I just focus on knocking out his AT assets, I've got carte blanche now just to run around and do whatever. So I managed, I got away with not being hit by the artillery observers. I'd knocked out his dog mines and AT rifles pretty quickly, to turn 3 maybe, and then to be fair to Phil, it was a tough game. So I won that game. So I'd finished on 5 wins and a draw, which I was obviously delighted with. And
Undefeated.
Yeah.
V3 competitive play so far.
V3. Well, I did lose a warm-up game.
Yeah, but
in a tournament.
That's not a tournament competitive game. That's just a practice. That's a friendly exhibition match, surely.
No, I did go to a 1-day tournament with a fluffy marine list with some LVTs. But anyway, at World Open War, undefeated, and we drew that round. So, like I said a minute ago, we needed 1 victory to win the round. So I won. I think Gerwin lost and Graham drew. But we got the victory we needed. So we ended up winning Group 3, which
nice.
We were
It's interesting that the group didn't require a runaway to win it. Like, because quite often when you go to sort of big 6-game tournaments, if it's an individual one, often the person who wins had to have won every single game. Whereas here you've got sort of, because it's a team element, actually you get these results where you can win the group even by having like a few bum rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like other than, I think we had 2 rounds where all 3 of us won, and then the other 4, it was either a loss or a draw, or we snuck it with I think Scotland, we snuck it with a win and 2 draws to win the round.
Nice.
So fantastic. We were obviously delighted with that. Group 3 winners.
Won the group. Well done.
Won the group. Yeah, very happy with that. And yourself, Jonny?
Yeah, we went into a tough group, day 2. So we were joking at the end of day 1 that it's win-win, really, because either we end up in group 1 with a chance to win the overall, or we go down and it's sort of less tense in the lower groups, I find. The top group is very tense because everyone's very serious. And so we knew it was going to be a tough day because the very good teams in there. We had Spain, Germany, and Poland, who are 3 very strong teams, take it very seriously. And so we played the Spanish first. Yeah, so game 1, I ended up playing Achilles, who wasn't Spanish captain. So this is my first game not against the captain. Yeah. We were playing another sort of King of the Hill mission. It was an interesting one where there was a train, which was basically a house that had an objective in it, in the very center of the table on this big old hill. which meant that when you deployed on either side of the hill, you literally couldn't see each other. One person had to deploy 3 units within 6 inches of the train, but obviously they could put them behind the train down the hill so they couldn't be seen.
Hmm.
Um, I'd taken it because I had the Nebbles, and basically my plan was anything that tries to get that objective, I'm just going to Nebble the train. Um, and then we basically spent 4 turns not doing much really, because we couldn't really see much. And then there was a bit of a scurry turn 4. Unluckily, turn 5, the game ended just as we pulled the last dice. There was the 10-minute call, don't start a new round
Hmm.
rule at this tournament. And basically, the TOs shouted it just as we were pulling the last dice of turn 5. And I needed turn 6 because at the end of turn 5, I think I was 2 or 3 dice down. Because what had happened was one of my dodgers had steamed in from outflank, and 6 riflemen had shot it and got the lucky 6 to pen. And now with the V3 rules and the soft skins, it fell apart and I lost like 2 units. And so I went those 2 victory points down. So now I needed the center objective not for the win, but for the draw. And I
Mm.
had 1 dodge left in reserve. And with the new outflank rules, my plan was that he was either going to outflank or I was going to bring him up because this train was exactly in the middle.
Mhm.
Everyone knew it was exactly in the middle. So I knew I could come on 12, get out 6, and then flame the train and then
Yeah.
either set it on fire, hopefully not, because then I had a ranger squad who were going to run in at the end of turn 6. Unfortunately, the game ended, so I didn't get the opportunity to see if I could have got the draw, and I ended up losing that one, which was a bit of a shame. To be fair, he's a very good player. The
Hmm.
Spanish generally very good, so it was always I was kind of playing for the draw from the beginning because I knew that with the dynamic of the table,
Hmm.
it was all going to come down to sort of a last minute flurry. And so I was expecting a draw anyway. And that's kind of what I was playing for. Um,
So
and then, Mhm.
before you mention how Phil and Rich did, just to pick up on what you just said, how did you find the dodges with V3 with the changes to soft skins and dying on sixes? Because lots of people have looked at dodges and gone, we're not taking them anymore because they're too squishy.
That was the only time that the V3 rules really hurt me, to be honest. And I was surprised when it happened because the big benefit was he ambushed it. So he had 6 riflemen hitting on it too. So I think he got the 6 hits and then got 1 6 off the back of that. And so he was looking, and actually, I was in cover as well. So I did my cover save and failed the cover save. So the odds of him actually killing it were sort of like, I don't know, like 2/3 of the time, maybe you would have expected him to kill it. And so it wasn't, if probably less than that, maybe it's half the time you'd expect him to kill it. And so it's like a knowing risk when you do it. And
Yeah.
actually, because I've got the 4 of them, I can
Yeah.
generally afford to lose one. And they're so mobile as well now. Well, they've always been that mobile, but now with the additional benefit of point blank pen bonus,
Yeah. Hmm.
they're really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
HMGs on wheels, I'd say, are really good. And because it's such a cheap platform,
Yeah.
I still think they've got something to them. Now, I am thinking about shifting to the half tracks
Okay.
because it's got the added benefit of 2 units coming on inside of it on 1 dice or 2 units pushing up on 1 dice. I'm not sure though, because for 25 points extra, I can have 2 HMGs on 2 Dodgers
Mm.
rather than the one half track. So I'm still in 2 minds about it, but I am still really enjoying them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed the scout cars, and obviously that's just like an armored dodge,
Mm.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Um,
How many points extra were they compared to a Dodge? Are they
oof,
like 68 points then?
60 something. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So a
So
Dodge is like 53 with an HMG. So I think it's about a 15-point difference.
yeah,
So worth it, do you reckon?
100%. And I, depending on the missions, so some missions I use them as transport with a squad inside and an officer, and they would debus and hose down people at close range of SMGs. Against Alex, for example, I foot slogged my 2 squads. So I just put the officers inside the scout cars and they just ran around like mobile HMGs.
Mm.
So having scout cars with HMGs plus the M16 with HMGs meant that I could just put pins out on vehicles if I needed to, or I could, target small team. Well, what were small teams in V2, or squads out in the open, and then leave the Stuarts to take out vehicles with the light AT. Alternatively, against Phil, for example, and Matt, where they didn't have vehicles, I had the Dakar Stewarts, which again they're not as Dakar as they were in V2, but they're still Dakar.
Plus,
Um,
you can put out multiple pins as a thing I like on multiple
the,
squads.
the ability to put out, 2 or 3 pins per vehicle. So, things like the LVTs or um, the Grant or the Lee, etc., or Dakar Stewart, putting out two pins per round is a big thing, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, HMGs were great.
Yeah, and I think we're probably a little bit biased because we both played US and sort of got the
Yeah,
joy of it,
yeah.
and so we haven't. There might be something else better that we haven't tried yet, but at the
Yes.
minute, that's my review as well. That HMGs are very good. I'm not sure that on as a team weapon they're worth the points, but certainly if you can
No.
put one on a vehicle, very good.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Anyway, getting back
yeah,
to it, how did Phil and Rich do in their matches against Spain?
they also lost,
Okay.
so it was a clean sweep for the Spanish.
Yeah.
Um, so then we went into game two against Germany.
Yeah, yeah.
And I basically played my counter list where I
Okay.
brought 3 rocket launchers. I played Martin, who had
Yeah.
3 rocket launchers.
Okay.
And so we had a little bit of that 6 off again.
Yeah.
Um, and it was interesting because he'd gone for a company commander with the idea of firing them all at once, I think. And
Mhm.
so, and it was, but then of course that means you're kind of putting a lot of stuff clumped together, which
Mm.
makes you a bit of a viable target.
Mhm.
I managed to get my Nebbles were slightly better than his Nebbles, basically. And so that was a bit of a win. He also brought sort of 3 armored vehicles. So because I didn't have much long ranged anti tank,
Yeah.
I probably, if we were choosing opponents rather than missions, I probably wouldn't have chosen his army to play against because
Mhm.
basically he does what I do equally well in terms of the rockets, but I don't have a way to counter his armor. Luckily, it was objectives, and what he did was he sort of used his armor as like a flying V, and basically went
Nice.
like and just went down one flank, which was the luckily not the flank I was planning to attack. But the benefit of the flamethrowers is if it's the flank you plan to attack, they're nice and close to your flamethrowers. If it's not, then you don't have to worry about them as much. And then, of course, I could rock on and do a pin. And we got an interesting thing in this one as well, where I put one pin on one of his tanks, and then it foobarred, and
Mm.
then and then it ran away,
Yeah.
and we had the rules query of, well, does it reverse? But then it says it has to be a run, and so we couldn't work out because you can only advance in reverse, and so we couldn't work out exactly what to do. And so what he actually did was he pivoted and ran towards his nearest table edge. But actually, having read it now, in the vehicle section, it does say you just do a
Mm.
reverse when you fubo with a tank. So there's a little hint for anyone who's playing a lot of tanks on the one time in what 10 games you fubar with this.
Mm. Yeah. So the foobar rules in the sort of orders bit basically talks about running towards table edges, but it's different for tanks or vehicles. But you need to then flip to the vehicle section to actually read that. It's a shame there's not literally one sentence in that
Yeah,
first foobar section which says, unless you're a vehicle, in which case you do the following.
exactly. Yeah, I just wish it was in the index underneath the fubar table. It says vehicles reverse
Yeah.
done. And so I managed to get a win out of that anyway, with
Cool.
getting some objectives, get a secondary, it was very nice.
Nice one.
Um, as a team, I think we lost that one. I
Okay.
can't remember the results on the other 2 tables, but we certainly didn't win that round.
Okay.
Um, and so that put us in a not great position going in round 3. We knew we definitely weren't getting top spot, and we
Yeah, yeah.
went in against Poland, and
So was this kind of playing off the third and fourth place at this point?
yeah,
Or
it
was
was
okay.
so basically the way. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the way Russell does the pairings is basically he does the top two of the group as the last game of the day,
Mm,
expecting that the top two of the group would be the two in contention sort of thing. So it's most exciting for them to play last.
sure.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and so the top 2 point scorers were Germany and Spain, and so they play each other last. The bottom
Okay.
two were Poland and England, and so we play each other last. And at that point, as you say, we were sort of playing for. I guess if one of us had smashed the other one, we maybe could have jumped up, but I think the gap was sufficient that it was really going to be hard to get into second place for either of us. And so we had again, I chose objectives. Jungle table though, which was a bit fiddly, lots of sort of like trees around and dense terrain. But it was quite nice. And I was playing Christoph, the captain, so another
Mhm.
captain round.
Yeah.
So of the 6 games, I played 4 captains, which is quite
Okay.
nice. And he had sort of I think he had either 3 or 4 25-pounders, which is what I would have done if I was running Brits.
Mm,
And then he also had 3 armored vehicles. He had sort of a light autocannon on the back of a truck.
mhm.
He had a Crusader, I think it was the AA tank.
AA one, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Mhm,
And then he had the Staghound, I think, as his armored car choice sort of
okay.
thing. And based on his list and the fact he had like Chindits and like veterans, I thought he was going to play very sort of gunliney and
Mm,
quite sort of standoffish. And what he did was I outflanked my engineers,
mhm,
and while they were outflanking, he just rushed all his armor forward because he knew
mhm,
that I didn't really have much. But I wasn't too worried about that because my plan was, if worst case, I was planning to come on the back of the table edge. Now you can to
mm.
counter that. But then basically what happened was turn 2 or 3, I think it was. He got like the first 5 dice, which is just a thing that happens in bolt action sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
We were about equal on dice as well. It was sort of like 16 to 18 at this point, whereas I had the 18 and he literally got the first 5 dice. So I didn't get to do my Nebbles and force his 25-pounders down. So
Mm,
they were like putting pins on my Nebbles. Then he had rushed this armor up. When the engineers finally arrived to deal with it, the flamethrowers missed and it all just got, but he did exactly what he should have done to beat me, basically, which was just get right in my face before my anti-tank assets get on, so that when they do arrive, you're in ambush basically to deal with them.
mm.
And so yeah, so bit of a hammering for the US in that one.
Okay.
And I can't remember the exact objectives. I got the secondary because
Right.
I did the classic sort of like I used my Dodgers as portable cover and
Hmm.
parked them in front of it and then ran some engineers up behind to so that I had cover from the 25-pounders. But
Anyone who's played you previously will be well aware of this tactic.
it's a strong tactic. It's
Yeah.
it's a good one. I mean, it is a bit of a last resort tactic rather than something I would recommend as your sort of go-to tactic. But
Yeah, yeah,
if you need some portable cover and you're happy to lose a vehicle,
yeah.
it's a good strategy. And then I think as a team, we lost that round
Okay.
overall. So I think we ended bottom of group one at the end. So fourth place overall, I'm calling it.
Yeah, yeah.
But the bottom
Same,
of our
same,
group.
same as last year for England. So, yep,
Exactly, yeah.
maintaining that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was interesting because last year, obviously, we had the Danes in group one. It
Yes.
was it was a slightly different layout. Who was the fourth team in group
Wales,
one? Wales. Yeah, so a
Spain.
very different
So
group one. There was only Spain and England who were consistent across the 2 years in getting in group one.
correct. Yeah, yeah. Spain and sorry, Denmark and Wales were in Group Two this year on day two. Yeah.
Yeah, which is
Mhm.
interesting. And then
Yeah.
who won that in Group Two?
Group Two was won by USA.
Yeah, strong performance from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Carlton as well because he went undefeated over the weekend, and the youngest player there, um, I think definitely surprised a few people. Very, very good player from what I gather. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the US to come all that way. I think did very
Mm,
well,
yeah.
and I think they're one to watch for future team tournaments, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I think overall, Johnny, I mean, how did you find? I was going to say, how did you find V3 at the international competitive level? But I'm going to caveat that with there obviously were some changes that Russell made and the TO team made in advance. And I'll also add at this point, maybe not as much as people online have been saying. I would say from my perspective, the two biggest changes from the rules kind of side of things was the cover rule was changed in terms of if 50% are in cover, irrespective of linear or dense, you get cover. And Russell also made close combat slightly more beneficial to the attacker in certain situations to try and encourage close combat. But the actual kind of rules in inverted commas, I didn't find many changes. The changes that did occur was to the obviously unit selection and national special rules and all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it was fairly, as you say, the changes weren't that consequential. Like you still got a good feel for V3.
mm,
Um, it was more sort of like, and the funny thing is actually the biggest changes I would say were the national characteristics, where especially the minors, he'd given them some really quirky ones, like the Hungarian ones I was talking about earlier.
mhm.
But actually, we didn't see that a lot because a lot of people lent on sort of the old favorites of the Brits, the Germans, the US, etc.
Yeah.
And so actually, I don't feel like I saw the biggest differences compared to V3 vanilla. I suppose actually we had a lot of the units that aren't in there yet. Like I couldn't have taken rocket launchers
Mm.
by the rule book. So that was a bit of a change. But I went in sort of viewing it as a bit of a sort of experimental tournament where the thing that I was interested in seeing and the thing that I found tricky on the day wasn't like the new rules. It was sort of the new meta, it, not meta for want of a better word, because actually it's not the meta yet. It's what people
Mm.
are trying out. I wanted to see what everyone was trying out. And these quirky lists that people were throwing together, sort of knowing exactly what they could do and what they couldn't do was tricky. But that was actually what I was excited for the most to see what people were thinking it was going to be good in V3.
I agree, and I know there's been a lot said online about things like HE spam and multi-launcher spam and so on. And I did play against multi-launchers and I did play against HE heavy lists and I did have, very low dice count compared to others. From my perspective, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as maybe people are making out. And yes, people lent into lots of similar units and so on, or lent into certain builds, but it is rock paper scissors. And
Oh
I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
because it was a team event, and I think because of how Graham and Gerwin and I built our list, we were able to maximize our chances of success based on the mission and the table.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think after, in the UK, after Warfare, after Beachhead, after Mincemeat, there's three big 2-day events coming up in the next 3 months or so. I think we'll have a much better idea of what solo V3 competitive bolt action looks like in the UK, because this is a team event with some changes, with bespoke missions to bespoke tables and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. For me, the only thing from like playtesting V3 and doing all the other bits that we've been doing, and the only thing that I've found that I'm not liking, because I think everything's been nicely sort of brought down, so there's nothing really obvious that's like a one-hit wonder. The only
yes.
one that stands out for me still is the Nebelwerfers and rocket launchers, because there isn't really a counter to it. And even when they weren't doing work for me,
Mm,
they actually were, because they were stopping people from going into certain areas. And
yeah.
there was no way for people to deny that really, because they knew at long range with hard cover or even soft cover, you weren't going to finish them off with sort of your rifle squad, even if you rush up. And then by rushing up, you've exposed yourself to potentially just being wiped because there's no cover against it. And so that for me is the only thing where I think they could have been dealt with better in the rule
Mm.
book, the rocket launchers.
Yeah, and also, Russell made some changes for WoW, and we've got the English Open coming up in under 2 weeks now, and we've made some changes, with treating them like light howitzers rather than, what they currently are in terms of minimum range and HE template and that sort of thing. Yeah, I guess we
Yeah.
just have to wait and see, don't
And
we?
I think that was, and the reason sort of we did that was because I didn't think, and I still don't think, that just putting extra pins on them is enough when you've changed the mechanics of the games to force people to take loads of +2 morale boosts anyway. And
Mm,
so I rarely was failing tests. Like I'd be getting loads of pins, but then passing a test, I'd get 2 shots off, and then I probably wouldn't have anything to shoot at anymore because I had 3 rockets of over 2 turns shooting. So by the third turn, I was ready to do a rally anyway. And now that rally just removes the pins entirely, it really wasn't a big deal like this D, because Russell had D3+1 pins on them.
yeah.
I really didn't notice it, really, to be honest. Like every now and then I'd fail a test, but it didn't discourage me from taking them.
Yeah, I think when Alex had two in our game, and they did go off even with the pins. He wasn't worried about them. He had an officer sat equidistance between them, within 6 inches of each, just going, yeah, we won't worry about that. We'll give you a +2 modifier and try and pass and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, the only risk I faced with them was at one point, I think I'd had 3 pins on one,
Mhm.
fired, took an additional 4 pins. He's inexperienced.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so he was sat there with 7 pins.
yeah,
Luckily, he got the hit, so he took out the thing that was actually a threat. And then an inexperienced squad just needed to come up and put 1 pin on him.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the roll was flubbed and he actually survived. But that was the only time where I thought, actually, these pins have caused me problems because I'm going to lose this dice. But actually, even that, I wasn't too worried because I was just going to recrew them the next time I had
Yeah.
the chance. And so it was, and now that you can take up to four and you can recrew and they're still so powerful for deleting units.
Mm.
Yeah, I think they do need to reduce the actual power of them rather than just saying, oh, you get slightly more pins.
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree. Yeah,
Mhm.
and obviously we'll do a debrief for English Open. I'm halfway through list checking as of recording, and I'm not seeing massive HE spam or massive. Well, actually, that's not true. I'm
Mm.
certainly not. So, I'm without spoiling the list. I am seeing some HE spam, but I'm not seeing multi-launcher spam currently. Halfway through the list checks.
Yeah. It's the indirect element. And this is why I like the fact that they increased the minimum range for the howitzers, because the one thing that can still delete units is that high explosive shell dropping on your head. And
Yeah, yeah.
so not being able to do that 12 inches away is really nice, basically.
Yeah, and it's a feel bad. You get hit by a heavy howitzer on a
Mm,
6, and you're like, "Well, that's my squad gone." Even if they're stubborn, given the size of the template, you're running 6, 7, 8 guys. Most of them are going to be under that template unless you daisy chain them out. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And then, but you only need to lose half and take 3 pins. And if it was a regular squad, odds are you're probably going to lose them. Although, having
yeah,
said that, you've got 6 officers on the table now.
yeah, yeah. It's a fair point.
So now we've moaned about Nebelwerfers. What's left to discuss?
So I just want to add, I think, people have said like the Dakar tanks, for example, are not a thing in V3. I took, the M3 Dakar Stuart, so the extra MG with the Recce. John Ross took, a couple of Panzer threes and a couple of Panzer twos with the autocannons. Ali was running what, five, Panzer threes. They are a thing. They might be putting out half the shots they used to, but it's still a lot of shots, and it's so easy to hit now. It's so easy to put pins on. Okay, you may not be killing units because of cover saves and so on, but they're a threat. And the M16, I absolutely love that. Okay, it's halving its shots, but still 12 shots, with +1 pen. Okay, normal V3 rules up to 24 inches. But the ability to just roll on an M16 half track on a first wave. And when I played Jacob in game five, and he had his 25 pounders and Bofors sat on the back line, I was like, well, I'm just going to roll on my M16 and put 12 shots into you. Okay, it's hitting on movement 5, no long range penalty, and I got a +1 pen. So
Nice. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that there is a role to play for Dackers, and I am a big fan of HMG currently. Um,
Hmm.
and prior to WoW, I was playing around with Marines and kind of like tasted days and learning games, and I'm loving the LVTs. They might only be armor 7, but they're putting out 3 pins a turn if you want to. So yeah,
Yeah, they're just a bit pricey, the LVTs for me. I think the Dakar tanks, I think, have been brought down now. So, like your Dakar Steward has been brought down now to a level where it's good. You don't regret bringing it, but you don't have to start your list with it, which I think is good. I think that's worked out nicely. My only complaint with that sort of half shots at MMG rule that they've given it is it's now made the heavy tanks like pointless. So they reduced the points on the heavy tanks, but then because of the half shots, you've got like a tiger putting out 3 shots.
yeah,
It
yeah,
really, if it doesn't have a big tank to shoot at, if the other person hasn't brought a tiger, the big tanks aren't worth it still because
yeah.
of the way that that sort of like flat rule. Yes, you brought them down, but you've also brought them down as well. And so I'm not sure it was the best way to deal with it, but I have to say that it has brought the Dakar tanks into line with the rest of the forces.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think anybody looks at a Dakar tank now and goes, "Oh, okay, that's 18 shots coming my way, etc." Just picking up on the bigger tanks, Panzer Ace. Let's see what happens with Armies of Germany, and whether or not anything happens with veteran stabilizers for Armies of US next year.
Yeah. I think it suffers. I think that rule suffers without spoiling future episodes.
Yeah,
I think those rules suffer the same thing I was just saying there, where if the other person doesn't bring a big tank, those rules are only beneficial really if you're doing big tank on big tank engagements. And so I think what I would have liked to have seen with those Dakar tanks is giving them a -1 to hit. If you're
mm,
firing more than one machine gun from the hull,
yeah,
-1 to
yeah,
hit, because that's going to push you to the Super 6 that you don't really see now for
yeah,
most things. And that would have kept the big tanks more playable still. But I guess time will tell whether I'm wrong or whether that initial insight is valid.
Yeah.
Overall, then Phil, what did you think of World Open War? As good as last year? Worse than last year? Better than last year? Where are you sitting?
I'd say better than last year, and that is said with respect to you having been on the England team last year and so on. I really enjoyed playing in the Lions with Graham and Gerwin. We all said, the three of us afterwards, because we weren't playing for England, Scotland, and Wales. There was a little bit of pressure off. Any pressure there was, to be honest, we probably put upon ourselves. So in some ways, it was a bit more relaxed and so on. Um, Obviously the results helped. It was nice to
Yeah.
nice to get nice to get the wins. But I
Mhm.
think same with WTC and WoW last year. It's just nice playing against different people. It was nice to see familiar faces from WoW and from Granada. I got to play people I hadn't played before. Hadn't played John Ross, hadn't played Yano, for example. I hadn't played Phil. So I really enjoyed that element. Um, I didn't think it was anywhere near what people maybe thought it was going to be like, with the sense that all the changes that have been made and so on. And any kind of time I called a TO over, it was either for line of sight or can you just confirm the rule? I think it's this, but rather than us spending however long looking up in a book, can I tell you what the situation is and just give me a yes or no kind of thing? Um, and it was nice to see different teams doing well. So there were different teams
Mm.
in Group One. From last year, there were different teams in Group Two from last year. All that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think overall very very enjoyable. I have my reservations about V3 competitive because of the whole sort of spam element and all that kind of stuff. That didn't come through at WoW. But I do appreciate that Russell had gone to lengths to mitigate and maybe minimize some of the concerns that we might have about V3 as a vanilla package played out of the rulebook.
Yeah. You see, I'm not too worried about this spam argue, like, because also it's like we use this word spam when people you're taking the same unit, but that's kind of how we fought wars. You had like you're not going to equip every squad differently because that creates a logistics nightmare. Equally,
Mm,
you put sort of the same tanks together, and then the command tank might be a different tank. But again, you're not going to have four different tanks fighting in the same platoon because again, absolute logistics nightmare, and also just a bit of a tactical headache for anyone who's trying to command that at a higher level because you're like, oh well, do I have a big enough gun? Like, and so I don't really have a problem when people sort of spam, for want of better units, because
yeah, yeah,
it can be historical. And I think when people have a problem with it, it's because they've spammed the most powerful unit they could find, basically. And actually,
yeah.
I don't think there's many of those units in V3 now. So from my perspective, I'm actually not too worried about that, even in like the nth degree competitive scene in V3.
Yeah, and to be fair, I was guilty of it in V2 at the truly competitive end. It was like, how many Gurkhas can I take? How many Dakar Stewards can I take? Oh, let's put some LMG bikes in and or some Brain Engineers. So yeah, I
Yeah.
am I am a hypocrite. I'm aware of
Yeah.
that.
And so having said all that, I really enjoyed it as well. The leading up to it, I did hit a point of sort of overwhelm where because there was so many rules changes, we've just had V3 come in, and then in order to allow us to run all the extra stuff, there was a lot of rules changes, which were necessary to allow us to run additional stuff and sort of keep it fun by keeping the miners in play.
Yeah.
But then there was some sort of rules changes that didn't add anything in terms of diversity, but were just how I think Russell thought the game should be played. That added a lot of sort of like, and I got to a point where I just thought, you know what, I'm not going to think about it anymore. I'm just going to build the list how I think the list will work.
Yeah.
And if I get caught short by something that I've missed on the third page of the third document, it is what it is at this point because I don't have the mental capacity to learn V3 plus V3 plus this.
Mm,
Um, and so yeah, so but all that said, it was fairly slick on the day. Like there's a few times there was a bit of confusion, but it was reasonably easily cleared up. Um, and so yeah, I really enjoyed it. And in terms of my opponents, I enjoyed playing every opponent that I played.
mm,
I don't think I've played any of the people that I've played before. Ben would be the one who I would have most likely have played before, obviously with him being English and on the South Coast.
yeah.
But I don't believe I played Ben before. If I have, it's been long enough ago that I don't mind playing him. Again, it's not like we play every week. And
Yeah.
so it was nice getting to play sort of six new faces. I tell a lie there. I've just remembered I played Phil at the Scottish Nationals, but with a very different list. So I'm going to count it as a brand new experience. And so, yeah, so I really enjoyed the opponents. I like the group format. I think
Mm,
that's the big win, that it does mean that sometimes you're out of the running entirely, but it does mean you can sort of take the pressure off, as you said, and just sort of relax and enjoy it. Um, and the other thing that I quite like at World Open War compared to WTC is I like that you pick the mission rather than the opponent. Now,
mhm.
that's not to say that I prefer that as a like one is better than the other, but I like that they're not doing the same thing, which means that if you do go to both one year, you get a very different team experience out of both.
Yeah, and I think having 24 tables with 24 missions bespoke to the tables, and yes, some of them were repeated. You're playing key positions with 4 objectives, 5 objectives, 6 objectives,
Yeah.
etc. But but they were different. I did like that. Actually, talking about WTC, I do like the fact that this year you can take, or you put in 5 lists
Hmm.
for your 4 players, and you can play the 5 over the weekend, so you're not
Also, they've
restricted. Yeah,
they've
yeah, yeah.
changed that where because it's always been you submit one extra, but then one doesn't get played. But
Mm.
now, at any
You
point, you can sub in.
Yeah, yeah. You
Interesting.
you put 5 lists in. You can take the 5 armies. You might only want to take 4, but you take the
Hmm.
5 armies, and you can decide at the start of the round. Actually, we're going to play the fifth list this time rather than the third list or whatever it is.
And any
That
army can be subbed out for it.
Yeah, yeah. As far as I understand
Interesting.
from no,
And so
that's a nice
players
change.
aren't bound to their armies either, are they? So you could literally all take a step to the left and play a
Yeah,
brand new
and
army.
I know Wales Wales were threatening to do that this year in Granada, weren't they? Where
Yeah,
they were going to play the person rather than the list because
yeah.
of this Welsh player has a good record against this opponent player, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I did really enjoy the missions. I had a similar thing though with the rules about when I saw the 24 missions, because I do like to read the missions in advance, maybe try
Yeah.
them out. As soon as I saw those 24 of them, I glanced through them, recognized that they're basically it's 3 missions, like what, 8 different ways. And I
Yeah.
and then at that point I just went, okay, I'll deal with it on the day. I've got a
Hmm.
vague overview. I basically picked out the ones where they weren't just the same 3 missions
Hmm.
and read those ones, but the rest of them I just thought I'll deal with it on the day because again, like this could be pointless information or it could be super valuable, but you don't really know until you arrive. And is it worth more than the time you spend and maybe developing the list? Um, and so yeah, there was quite a lot there, but
Hmm.
none of the missions were so bizarre that you really had to have read them 3 months in advance, were they?
Yeah, no, they weren't, and I'm just chuckling because despite our Hawaiian shirts, we did take it seriously. We did have a pre event meeting. We did run through all 24 missions between the three of us, and we did discuss who would favour which one. So yeah,
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. You see, we looked through them and sort of decided I once would recognize the fact that it was the same mission repeatedly. We sort of went back to our original positions of, well, we know what we're doing here. So I guess, Phil, having said all that, you'd recommend WoW for anyone who's considering for next year?
I absolutely would. I really enjoyed the team element to it and the changes that Russell made and the clubhouse, all that sort of stuff. So if you are interested in putting a team in, please contact Russell. We'll put you in touch, or you can find Russell on Facebook. Or if you want to play for a team that's already entered historically, Russell can put you in touch with the rep for your respective nation.
Nice. And if you don't want to play in WoW, is there anything else on the agenda for you?
So I guess coming up for us, we've obviously got the English Open in under 2 weeks. So our next episode will be debriefing on the English Open. Personally, for me, I am starting to look ahead to Beachhead in
Hmm.
February, and there's at least one or maybe two events between now and then where I might be helping out with TO in. So kind of like moving more towards the TO side of things as well.
Yeah,
And
little
you said,
1 day ones.
yeah, so we've got little 1 day ones coming up where very happy to help out either on the day or in advance and list checking and pack writing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm happy to shout them out as well as they come up so that people, because one of the things with the tournaments is if no one knows it's there, it might as well not be there. And so always happy to shout them out as well.
And yourself, Johnny, what's coming up for you?
Similar vibes. Beachhead's the one that's on my main one on the agenda. Obviously, I've got some other bits of sort of like bolt action going on and sort of bits for the pod that I've got my eye on. I'm really looking forward to diving through the armies of what we've got so far and sort of looking ahead to what we might get.
Mm.
But other than that, Beachhead's my big one. And then Welsh Nationals after that. If we see Welsh Nationals next year, that'll be a good one as well. Those are the big two. And obviously, I'm I really want to see what people are going to start leaning into in the competitive scene because I don't think off the back of WoW, it's obvious what the most efficient build is yet.
No, I'd agree, and I know people are wanting to look at WoW and go, "Well, what's the new meta?" and so on. And it's far too early. It isn't. It wasn't the full kind of V3 experience because of the changes that have been made. And it's going to take 6, 9, 12 months for things to settle, develop, try out. It's not going to work, and so on. That said, have you got an idea about Beachhead yet for
I
you?
do, but I'm not gonna.
Okay,
What was it? OPSEC.
OPSEC.
Yeah, I can't be divulging that yet. I've got my big red briefcase with top secret written on it. Might have a few versions of a few different lists in there.
Yeah.
But it has given me some ideas. Well, the thing that I'm struggling with V3, to go off on another tangent briefly, is having to take a rifle platoon at the moment because everything's so vanilla. I'm
Yes.
finding in the way that you're doing an officer attacks in V2, in V3, I'm finding the rifle platoon for a lot of nations is a bit of a tax where
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm having to take two rifle squads who really don't have a job other than if it's objectives, they'll camp the objectives. And
Mm.
so that's what I'm playing with at the minute. I think the Rangers were good for that because they're
Hmm.
really good at putting pressure on early. But because you've got no anti-tank on them, they're very easy to push back on with armor. So I've got a few ideas, but I'll not be divulging it yet. Have you been
Okay.
list planning already?
Yeah, I have. So the theme for Beachhead is against all odds, and
Hmm.
whilst singing Phil Collins in my head, I've also been thinking ahead to lists, and I'm going the other way to you. I'm leaning into the rifle platoons. Um,
Really?
yeah. But I'm
Is
not
that going to
gonna.
be your against all odds that you've got nothing but rifles? So
Yeah.
anytime you face armor,
What? Yeah, so I've got something in mind. It's a nation I don't play very often, and I've been working in the background on them, but we'll see. Or I'm going to bring out the Marines and roll in some LVTs off the beaches and all that sort of stuff. But
yeah, that's
I
cool.
I don't think it's going to be US at this stage. So
Yeah, I think Marines sort of last standing without any armor support with like bazookas and stuff would be quite cool. Bazookas, mortars. I think that would be quite a cool and competitive army. Um, it certainly isn't a slouch anyway.
no, no.
Anyway, huge thank you to Russell for running World Open War again, and congratulations on another successful year. Thank you to everyone who helped out as well to run it. Gaz being a prime example, who once again was there for the full weekend, really helping out. And thanks to all the players who were there for cracking spirit. Like it was really played in the best of spirits. And I didn't see any of the players really getting cross at each other or anything. So again, congratulations to Russell for running a successful event, and thanks to the community for helping to play fantastically competitive games in the best of spirits.
Yeah, I'd second that. There were no issues I could see between players. Everybody had a great time. The evenings were good fun as well. So yeah, big thank you to Russ, Gaz, and everyone else behind the scenes, and
And a
also
huge congratulations to Spain for winning the tournament overall. They're unstoppable at the minute, I think, off the back of WTC and World Open War. We'll have to see what they can pull out in the next WTC, I guess.
yeah, big well done to Spain. Well done to USA for winning Group 2. Well done for me, Graham and
Well
Gerwin
done,
for winning
Lions.
Group 3. Thank you, and also well done to Wales for winning Group 4. Wales 2.
Well, that's ta-ta for now from me.
And it's ta-ta for now from him.
Ta-ta.
Ta-ta.